Summer swelter, as we all know, at least 80 million Americans have been under heat alerts today, stretching from the West Coast all the way to Florida's East Coast. And as you can see, there will be little relief in these cities over the next few days. All will see temperatures well above normal, and all about 30 cities could see record high temperatures this weekend. More than 24 records were set or tied yesterday. I want to bring in a leading climate expert. Michael E. Mann is the author of the upcoming book, Our Fragile Moment: How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. He's also Presidential Distinguished Professor at the University of Pennsylvania. And thank you very much for joining us, Professor. Great to talk to you. Last month was the planet's hottest June on record, and by a wide margin over the previous record set in 2019. I guess guys like me keep asking the same question. Is this the new normal? What do you think?
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Jim. And unfortunately, it's worse than a new normal, right? Because a new normal sort of sounds like we've got a new situation. We just have to, figure out how to deal with it. But this gets worse and worse. As long as we continue to burn fossil fuels and generate carbon pollution, and the planet continues to heat up, we're going to see more of these unprecedented extreme weather events. And by the way, you mentioned June was the warmest June on month. It's now almost certain that July will be the warmest month that this planet has seen in recorded history. July is typically the warmest month of the year, and this is going to be the warmest July. A part of that is there's an El Nino event that's brewing. That adds a little bit of extra heat, but most of that is because of the warming due to increased carbon pollution.
And NASA scientists predict 2024 will probably be hotter than this year. The trajectory is not good. We're going in the wrong direction, and your sense as to whether or not this can be turned around?
Yeah, so 2024 may be a little warmer. The El Nino, we've only seen part of the El Nino event. In 2024, we'll see more of that El Nino event, so it might be a little warmer. But here's the thing. We are actually right now on almost exactly the trajectory that climate scientists, climate modelers predicted we would be on decades ago if we didn't act, if we continued to burn fossil fuels. And so, there are no real surprises when it comes to the overall warmth of the planet. It's pretty much what we predicted it would be in this scenario. What is a bit surprising are these extreme weather events, these floods and wildfires, heat domes. And there's some evidence that there are processes that are important in the real world. It has to do with the behavior of the jet stream and how these weather systems get stuck in place, these heat domes get stuck in place. The models don't completely capture that behavior. And so to some extent, those impacts are exceeding the predictions. And it's a reminder that, this, again, it's worse than a new normal. This will continue to get worse if we don't reduce carbon emissions and do it quickly.
Yeah, and last weekend we were talking about these very strangely hot water temperatures around the Florida Keys, and that is just a scary indicator, it seems. And I guess with the heat that we're seeing this year, we're going to see some cascading effects, stronger hurricanes. There's always the discussion about the water in the Gulf getting too hot. What is your sense of it? Might we be looking at those kinds of ingredients being in the mix for a really bad end of this hurricane season?
Yeah, I mean, those are hot tub temperatures that we're seeing down, off the coast of southern Florida, unlike anything we've seen before. We call those marine heat waves. And of course, like, the sorts of heat waves that we're used to, they become more intense. They become more frequent as the planet warms up. Now, the Atlantic is really unusual. Much of the planet is warm. We've got an El Nino event. It's the Northern Hemisphere summer, and we've got the effect of global warming, all that coming together. There's one other feature, and it might be related to El Nino, but there's been very little Saharan dust that's been blown out onto the Atlantic. Those trade winds have been weaker than normal. That might be related to El Nino. And so there's been so little dust that that dust normally reflects some of the sunlight back to space. And since it's not there, that means that the eastern Atlantic, the eastern tropical Atlantic, is quite a bit warmer than it normally would be. That means those hurricanes encounter warm ocean temperatures earlier in their trajectory. The western Atlantic's typically much warmer, but because the eastern Atlantic is so warm right now, those storms can begin to intensify earlier, and that creates a scenario where they can become much stronger by the time they make it to the Caribbean, to the U.S. East Coast. That's something that we want to look out for as we get into the heart of the hurricane season.
And just very quickly, I mean, one of the things that caught the East Coast by surprise was all of that smoke from the wildfires in Canada. Is that something that we're going to have to get used to? More of those kinds of days on these. Californians are like, hey, wait a minute, you know, we're used to this stuff out in California, but not so much on the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Philadelphia most of the time, and there was at least one day this summer where we had the worst air quality, I think, in the world. Worse than Beijing, worse than anywhere else. It's something that I saw down in Sydney during the Black Summer of 2020 when I was there on sabbatical, and they had these record wildfires, and you could see and smell the smoke. It's very odd to have that same experience here in Eastern North America, but that's what we've seen, and it's a reminder, you know, to expect the unexpected. Think about it this way. It's not a cliff we're going to go off of. It's more like a minefield that we're walking out onto. And the farther we walk out onto that carbon warming minefield, the more of these unprecedented events and surprises that we're going to encounter. The only smart thing is to stop that forward lurch onto the minefield. And that's what we need to do. We need to bring down those carbon emissions 50% by 2030, down to zero by the middle of this century if we want to avert a truly catastrophic 3-degree Fahrenheit warming of the planet.
All right, Professor Michael Mann, thank you very much. We'll talk to you again about this. It's an extremely important topic. We do it a lot here on this program. We'll do it again. Thanks so much. Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Jim.